Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us with our second webinar of your orientation series. In case I am new to you, I'm Angela Francis. I'm the Assistant Dean of General Education and First Year Experience, and this is our Blackboard Basics webinar. So I am very excited to have you with us. I'm also joined by members of the events team and a captioner as well. So thank you to all of the wonderful support staff who are here enabling this webinar. Before we get started with the actual content, I just want to highlight we have a credit for prior learning webinar on Thursday, followed by Tools for Success coming in January. So please join us if you can. We also have just two main guidelines for how to make sure I see your questions most appropriately. If you have any questions about the content, so questions about using Blackboard, you're going to want to put those in the QA area by clicking the button you can see pointed to right here. If, however, you're having technical problems, so you can't hear me or you can't see the screen, please do put those here in the chat so that we can get to fixing those issues as well. And that's particularly important in this webinar because I will be moving between the PowerPoint you're seeing on your slide now or on your screen now and an actual Blackboard site so that I can actually show you the process of doing the things we're talking about. You should also feel free to go into the orientation site and follow along with some of what I'm going over. You won't have access to all the different types of assignments, but for example, when I'm showing you how to use the text editor, you do have access to that in orientation. So here's our agenda. We're going to start with just some general information about navigating your courses. We'll talk about using the discussion board, blogs, journals, and wikis, tests, assignments, and my grades, and some tips for the semester. If we have time, I'll also be very happy to show you a course in Blackboard, so you'll be able to see that indeed everything we've been going over and everything you've been experiencing in orientation is indeed relevant, and it's what you would see in your courses as well. So let's get started with a bit of a demo. I want to talk about navigating your courses using the discussion board and blogs, journals, and wikis. So you'll see now I'm actually on the CUNY homepage. So not just the CUNY SPS homepage, but the CUNY homepage. This is my favorite way of navigating into Blackboard. So if you haven't been quite sure how to do that just yet, my suggestion is to go to www.cuny.edu, hover over login, and choose Blackboard. Now I'm already logged in, so I'm not going to click this, but to me, this is an easy way to access not just Blackboard, but you can see here CUNY first, as well as DegreeWorks. And DegreeWorks, if you aren't already familiar with it, is a great way to check what you need to take in terms of courses and what requirements you still haven't fulfilled, as well as if you're thinking about changing your program or your major, seeing how that would carry over. So this is also a great tool. But focusing back into Blackboard, when you hover over login, click Blackboard, it will ask you to sign in. And when you do that, you should see a page that looks something like this. Now, there are some potential differences. I have a lot of buttons up here that you might not have. That's both because of previous campuses I was in. I got all of my degrees from CUNY. So for example, you can see the Grad Center. You might have something from, say, Lehman or Kingsborough. That's all fine. So don't be too nervous if you log into Blackboard and this looks different than you're seeing on my screen or different than you're seeing in a video. That's fine. What you do want to keep an eye out for when it comes to the start of the semester, so I would say just check to see if you have this Newman Library button. This one can be very helpful. The rest of the homepage is going to be fairly similar. So you'll have courses listed over here. Depending on the orientation you're in, your orientation might be under My Organizations. And as a student here, this is also where you'll see something like Spark. So keep an eye out here. It's perfectly fine if you're seeing previous semester courses. So for example, I can still see courses from the fall. What you can do if you would like to not see that. So you'll notice when I'm hovering my mouse over my courses, there's a little gear that appears here to the right. Click that, and it will bring you into a space where you can personalize how this appears. My suggestion is first to group them by term. So that's why you can see on my courses, all of my fall 2023 courses were together. It's because I've grouped them by term. So you can group them by term, and then you can hide previous terms if you would like, just by making sure nothing is selected over here. One note that I always remind people of when I'm showing them this is you want to make sure that you are doing this for previous courses. This does not unenroll you from a course. It just hides it from view. So you don't want to do it for a course for your current semester. So once you do that and you click submit, that is how you'll have a nice, neat page like this, rather than something that looks more like this, where it's just a whole lot of courses from different semesters. Now, I'm actually going to go into a site called SPS Online Learning Essentials, which is down here. And just as a reminder, when you want to enter into a site, you want to click the name of it. So if you are in Writing at Work, you want to click where it says COM 210 Writing at Work, not one of the announcements. Because if you click the announcement, like I've done here, all I can see is the announcements. And so there's no menu on the side. Whereas when you click the menu on the side, or excuse me, the name of the course, even if you enter a course where you're not seeing more than the announcements, you can see here there is a blue line on the left. And if I click that, I've got access to my main navigation. So that's how you can do that. When you enter into any course site, you will first enter into the announcements page. And while you are generally getting your announcements emailed to you, you do want to make sure that you review this, because sometimes a faculty member will opt to just post an announcement in the site without emailing it. Next, I just want to show you some information about using the discussion board. So I'm going to head to this course's discussion board, and you can see all of the forums here. I'm going to use this opportunity to show you what, when I was younger, was called a WYSIWYG editor. What that stands for is what you see is what you get. And essentially, it means that if I go into here and I say create thread, for example, I have a text box here, and however my entry looks here, however my post looks here, is how it's basically going to look when I post it. So I can, for example, bold text. I can highlight something and underline it if I would like to. I can insert pictures and links, and they will all appear as they will when I post my post. So just a couple of common tasks that you might find you need to do. One is going to be to create links. So to create a link, you have a couple of ways to do it. I'll show you my preferred way, which is to have the text first. So if one of my favorite websites truly was the cuny.edu homepage, and I wanted to make that into a link, grab my link and highlight the text that I want to make into a clickable link. And then I'm looking for the icon that looks like a chain. The other option I have, I'm on a PC, so if you'd like a shortcut, it is Control K, And it should be similar. I'm trying to remember if on a Mac, I believe it would then be Apple K, but it might be Command K. It's been a little while for me. Either way, whether you use the keyboard shortcut or the icon that looks like a chain here, you will have a window that opens up. You can see that the text I highlighted is already here in text to display. And all I need to do is paste my link for the URL. Please note it's really important to have that HTTP, or in this case, HTTPS part of the URL here. If you start it with just www dot, it's actually going to add this to the end of the URL where the website is, and your link won't. So this is super important. The other thing that's important is to tell it to open in a new window, because this will just make it easier for everyone to navigate back to the site after you're done looking at the link you've posted. So you'll do those two things, putting the URL here, saying open link in new window. You'll say save, and now you can see I've got a link here. And in fact, I can click on it by pressing Control and just clicking, and I can make sure that this link works exactly the way I want it to. Other things that you may need to do include adding an image. So I might say, for example, I love hamsters. I love hamsters, just like this one. And now I want to add an image. So I have this image saved on my computer. And what you can do is press this plus button here on the last row, the very last icon. When you click it, this is the Add Content window. And I'm going to select Insert Local Files. When you do this, you end up with the opportunity to choose your file. So I'm going to choose this picture. And now you can see I have a picture of a hamster. Now this is a bit large, right? You can see it's already requiring a bunch of scrolling. And so I'm actually going to right click on this and say image. And now I can change the size. As long as this lock right here is closed, and I'll open it so you can see the difference. So as long as it's closed, I can change either dimension and it won't warp my picture. So I tend to try to have the largest dimension be about 300, unless that would make something difficult to see. And you can see it automatically made this smaller. You can also add a description in case you have anyone who's visually impaired. And then when you're done, just say save. And once again, you can see that this is now reflecting the changes I made in size. Beyond that, if you continue to want to change it again, you just have to click it, right click on it, and choose image. You can also sometimes just paste images in. However, just be aware that then if the image where you've copied it from breaks, sometimes that can cause some issues. So it's just safer to save it and put it on your post this way. Other things that you can do, so you've seen I've done just general formatting, you've seen a link, and you've seen an image. Just in case it ever becomes relevant, you can add bulleted lists, or you can add numbered lists. So in this case, once again, you can see I've just put the text down here on the screen. And then if you scroll up, actually, I'll just move this on up so it's easier to see above the hamster. All right, so if I highlight the items in my list, I can choose between a bulleted list or a numbered list. If I want to get fancy, I can choose which type I'd like of either. I'm not particularly fancy this. I'll just use the bullets. And there you go. The other tools here, most of them you will not often need to use. There is one exception, however. If you are pasting your work from Word, Word has a whole bunch of HTML that you don't see, and some of that is excess, and it can mean that things aren't formatted exactly the way you want them to be. And so if you're doing that, which is a good idea, just in case you have something you've been writing and your internet goes out, you're going to want to do something called clearing formatting. So I'm going to give you an example of that with what I've done here, just so you can see the types of changes it will make. So I've just centered the image as well, so you can see that. I'm going to select everything. And in this case, I did the keyboard shortcut Control-A. And then I'm going to come up here, and you can see there's a T with a little underline with an X. This is the clear formatting button. And when I click this, you can see what left and what stayed. So this that I had centered is now justified to the left. All of my bold and my formatting, all of that's gone too. But you can see my list is still here, my link is still here, and my image is still here. So that is a quick overview of the key things you'll be doing. I should note, if you decide you want to get rid of a link, since you saw that clear formatting didn't do that, all you'll do is click into the link like I've done here, and then click this button that looks like right next to the chain, where it looks like something is breaking with the chain. That's because we're breaking the link. And if you realize you did something you didn't like, you can say undo either by clicking this arrow or by using the keyboard shortcut Control-Z. So I'm going to just say test and post this so that you can see it. So I am now in this forum, and if I go into here, here is my post, and you see it looks very much like it did in the editor. And then you can also see a couple of options. Now, I want to point out what you can't see here. I don't have the ability to edit. Editing is available and deleting is available based on the settings of the form. And you should not assume that you will always have the ability to do so. It's actually safer the first time you post in a forum to assume you won't be able to do so. And as a result, you're going to want to make sure that you are satisfied with your post before you post it. Faculty will have the option to make a post editable as long as you are not in what's called a post-first forum. A post-first forum, when you go into it, rather than seeing what you do here, where I can see who has said something, you will just see a warning page that this is a post-first forum, and you will see the assignment directions. If you see that, your professor does not have the option to give you the choice to edit your posts. So just be aware of that, please. If you do have the ability to edit your post, you'll be able to see that right down here. There will just be a button that says edit. Other things that you can do. In a discussion board, you will have the option to do up to one of two things. Either subscribe to the forum or subscribe to your thread. If you can subscribe to the forum, like you can here in the QA, you'll see a button that says subscribe. And doing this means that if anyone posts either a new thread to the forum or responds to a thread on the forum, you will get an email. So this is a great thing to do if it's a QA forum and you're nervous about the course. You'll be able to see whenever there is a question or an answer. If you want to unsubscribe, just click the link again, and you can see I'm back to not being subscribed. When you can subscribe to a thread, and I'm going to go into time management here, create a quick thread. So here you can see I don't have that subscribe button here, and that's because I can't subscribe to this forum. I can subscribe to a thread. So one way to do that is to go into the thread. And if I had actually put text here, oh, nope, you can still see it. If you look right underneath, in my case, the orange student preview mode is on. You can see there's a subscribe button. So I can click this, and I am now subscribed. And if I hover over it, I can unsubscribe. If you don't see it, like I didn't see this at first, just make sure you're scrolled all the way up. If you want to subscribe to multiple threads or unsubscribe to multiple threads, the easiest way to do that will be from the forum page. So you can see I can see all of the threads here. If I wanted to, I could click this button to select everything, or of course I could select various, just like this. And then you'll go to thread actions and you can see subscribe, unsubscribe. So I can subscribe by clicking everything here. And I can unsubscribe if I realize I made a mistake just by doing that again. So that's that method there. Let me pause just to make sure I don't see anything here. I do see one question about what I've covered so far. Can you set your Blackboard account to send an email notification if a professor posts an announcement? You unfortunately cannot change the settings on your account. What will often happen is if a professor opts not to send an immediate email, eventually you'll get a notice that an announcement has been posted. But instead, it's just much better to check course sites on a schedule. So for example, when I'm teaching my preferred, if I could say what every student would do in my courses, I usually had a midweek deadline on Thursday for posting an initial post to the forums, and then end of week on Sunday. So week starting on Monday, I would say log in the first time Monday or Tuesday to make sure you understand everything. By Thursday to post anything requiring a midweek deadline, and then by Sunday to respond to anything on the discussion board and submit your assignments for the week. If you do something like that, you should be fairly safe because it's no more than a couple of days between checks. In some cases, though, particularly in the accelerated courses, for example, in the summer or the winter, you're going to want to check every day. And then there's another question about how do you set or change the email subscribe notifications go to? So they have to go to a CUNY email address, which really does limit you because you may be asking this because you want them to go to your personal email. So if that's what you were wanting, the way to go about that is to forward or have email forwarding for your inbox. But if you're someone who has a couple of different CUNY email addresses and you want to change that, on your home page, if you scroll, you'll see something here, tools, and then there should be an update email button here. So you would just enter the CUNY email you would want it to be sent to and say submit, and it will take care of that for you. You will get an email notifying you both at your previous, so let's say you were using a Lehman College email account and you want to use your SPS one, you would get an email confirming the change both to your Lehman email and your SPS one, just so you knew for sure that that was done. And then one last thing that I just want to show you before we move on is this search button. So this is one of my favorite things that I didn't know about when I was a student. You have the ability within a discussion board or a forum to search both the current forum, the current discussion board, or every forum in your course. So times where this could come in handy, you might want to do this to see everything your professor has said in all forums of the course so you can see all of their public feedback, just as an example. Or you might want to see every time someone has mentioned you by name. So I'm going to search here for my name. Hopefully it will pick me up as the preview user. And there we go. So you can see I searched in the forum and I got my one post within this forum. If I were to go to this search, and instead of the current forum, I would say all forums in this case, organization. For you, it will say course, and search again. You can see all of the posts I've made here across all of the forums. So again, you can just search for your professor's name and you'll be able to see all of their feedback or all of their public posts. And that can be a really good way of staying on track. So I also want to give you just a bit of a demo about blogs, wikis, and journals, and this will actually be much quicker than the discussion board one because that text editor you saw me do all of those things in, that's the same text editor you'll see in every tool. So if I go into a blog and I click this, you'll see the blog instructions here, and create a blog entry is a button here. And when I click this, It's the exact same text editor. So once you feel comfortable with it using one tool like the discussion board, whenever you see it for a blog, a journal, or a wiki, it will be exactly the same. And one more note, if you realize you don't need all of this, you just want to put plain text in, you can actually hide these by clicking the ellipses, and you're just seeing the first row. You can also click it again to see everything. Just a little bit of information. There's really only one difference between a blog and a journal, and that's who the audience is. So with a blog, everyone in the course or everyone in a group, if it's a group blog, can see it. If it's a journal, only you and your professor can see it. So that's the main thing you want to keep an eye out for. If you're posting something to a blog, just be aware that your peers can see what you write. If you're posting it to a journal, it's only your professor. There is a bigger difference when it comes to wikis, but most of you will actually be familiar with this. So if you've used Wikipedia, this will not be too much different. Essentially, a wiki enables one person to make a post and another person to change it or modify it. So you can see here, I made this post and it was modified by someone else. The great thing about this, and I just happen to know what they changed, they added this picture. The great thing about this, and particularly for group work, I know sometimes with group work, there's a lot of anxiety about how will the professor know that I did all of this work and such group member did nothing. The answer is through wikis, because if I'm the professor, I can see who made what changes. So I would be able to see every version of this homepage and who made the changes to it as well. But if I come in here and I'll just click edit just to drive the point home, the exact same tools. So I would say if you're at all uncomfortable or uncertain, go ahead and give them a try in the discussion board. Ask us any questions you have, because once you get it down, it will make all of the rest of these tools so much easier. All right, so let's move on. I want to talk a little bit about tests and exams. First off, I want to cover some common question types, as well as talk about some key settings. So if we're thinking about key settings, first off, you have these timed exams. So this is if you have an hour to complete the exam. The big thing to remember is that this clock stops for nobody. So even if you lose your connection or you navigate away from Blackboard, the clock will continue. That means don't start a timed exam until you know you're ready and you feel comfortable with the amount of time you have, as well as with your internet connection. If you see something that says forced completion, that basically means if you open it, you have to finish it. So if the timed exam is forced completion is not enabled, I could close the exam, navigate away, and then reopen it and be fine. Forced completion, I navigate away, that's the end of that test attempt. And if there's only one attempt, that's the end of my one attempt. So just make sure if you see forced completion as a setting, that you are ready to spend however much time it's estimated you'll need to finish that exam or test. If you see multiple attempts, and this is what you're seeing in orientation, that means you can take the exam more than one time. This could say a certain number of attempts, like you have 2 times, or it can say unlimited. What varies with this is how those different attempts are treated. So usually what I've seen is that your best score is what's kept, but it could, for example, be that your most recent score is what's counted, even if it's not your highest. So just be aware of that. Then set on a question by question basis is partial credit. You'll usually see this on a multiple answer question. And essentially it means that if you get part of the question right, but not all of it, you can get part of the credit. If you do not see this enabled for a question, it means it's all or nothing. And here's more information about multiple answer questions. In order to get this fully correct, you need to select all of the correct answers, but also only the correct answers. So if you get all of the correct answers selected, but you also select something that's not a correct answer, it will tell you you got this question wrong. And sometimes this can trip students up, because if you're looking at your solution and it's showing you quote unquote answers, Blackboard does not mean those are the correct answers. It means those are the possible answers. So if, for example, you're taking the Blackboard Basics quiz right now, and you're taking a multiple answer question and you're seeing the answers, just be aware that some of those quote unquote answers are not the right ones. They're just possible ones. So that's it for tests. They're actually pretty simple, and I would suggest giving them a shot in orientation. The one thing I do want to note before I actually talk about assignments and my grades is with tests and the timing for feedback. We are able as faculty members for multiple choice, multiple answer, true or false questions to put the answers into Blackboard ahead of time. And what that means is that we can make it so that as soon as you submit your test, if we've chosen to do so, you can get your score. So that's what's happening in Blackboard right now. As soon as there is a different type of quiz question, like an essay question, for example, your faculty member has to manually go in and review your answers and assign you a grade. So just be aware that sometimes for multiple choice questions, for example, or multiple choice tests, where that's the only type of question there is, you'll actually be able to find out how you did right away, but that's not always going to be the case. All right, let's talk about assignments and my grades. Want to talk about some common Blackboard my grades icons. Want to show you submitting Blackboard assignments. Want to talk to you about rubrics. And I want to talk to you about Safe Assign. Lastly, I do want to show you more about reviewing your professor's feedback, because I realized when I was teaching, sometimes students didn't know where to see everything I was providing feedback on. So, icons. There are 5 possible icons, but you are most frequently only going to see these top 3. The first one, which looks like a green circle with a checkbox in it or a check mark in it, means you submitted or completed the work, but you're not going to get a grade for it. So this is what you'll see when something is marked for completion. And for example, if you submit our orientation feedback survey in orientation, you'll see a green check mark because you did it, and that's how it's graded. If you see a yellow icon with an exclamation point in it, this means you submitted your work and you're currently waiting for feedback or a grade from your faculty member. So if you see this icon, that also means you did what you needed to do, provided you actually submitted the assignment. And you just have to wait for feedback. And that can often take 1 week, maybe 2 weeks. Your professor should be telling you the general timeline of feedback for your course. The third one you might see, and this is one I really want you to keep an eye out for, it's that blue icon. It makes me think of a timer. What this means is that you began the assignment, but you haven't submitted it yet. If you see this in my grades, it's very important that you return to that assignment and submit it, because your professor cannot see the assignment until you submit it. The exception to that is if you save a draft on the discussion board, your professor can do a search for drafts. But if you are, let's say, uploading a paper as a Blackboard assignment, until you say submit, we can't see it. So please do make sure if you see this icon, you go and you finish submitting your work. The other 2 that you will very rarely see, there's that gray icon. That means you are exempt from an assignment. That's a great thing. So if you see that, it's only good news. And if you see that red exclamation point, it means there's an error and you need to contact your instructor. I have been at CUNY and in Blackboard since approximately 20 2008. I have not seen this icon once. So odds are slim, but if you see it, please do reach out immediately. All right, I'm going to head back into Blackboard because I want to show you assignments and my grades. So I'm going to start by actually submitting an assignment. So for assignments, you can see in orientation, we have made the link when you have something to do blue. Be aware though that this is something we're doing in orientation. So in your courses, this link may not be blue, it may be black. And the thing to look for is actually an underline. So it's very subtle, but if you see the underline, that means it's a link. Whereas if you don't, like you do here, that just means it's the title of the content. So you're going to click the link into the assignment, and you can see a bunch of information here. Here's all of the instructions that were located on the previous page. And then over here, you can see general information. So this is worth 20 points. It's important to know how many points are total in your course. Easiest place to find that information is going to be the syllabus. You can also sometimes see it in my grades. But in this case, this I happen to know is out of 100. So really, this is 20% of my grade. There will also, when applicable, be a little note here that this is a safe assignment. What a safe assignment does is it looks at your submission and it checks it against both information that's on the free web, information that's in databases it has access to, but also assignments that other students have submitted. And it looks for matching or how much what you've submitted meets up with or matches what it has in its database. What I do want to highlight here is that you will, generally speaking, see a score or a percentage. So let's say I submit an assignment and it pops up with a 40% match. Do not freak out, because what your professor has to do every time, not just when it is a high percentage, is actually go into the report and review the report, because it will also flag things like quotations or works cited pages or things of that nature. So you can look at the report yourself if that's enabled, just to see what it's flagging. But please don't be alarmed if you just see a high percentage and you check and it's not actually any sort of academic integrity violation. I also want to highlight, though, that there's a rubric here. And this rubric, when you can see it, is actually going to be the same rubric your professor is using to grade your work. And so before you work on your assignment, this is something that I would really suggest looking at, because if I want to get a perfect score, which I happen to want to, I want to make sure that I am successfully doing these things marked here. So you can see this before you submit your work. And when your professor grades you, you can also see how they scored you. Now, to submit your work for an assignment, you're going to have what looks like 3 options. And unfortunately, there is actually a right choice here. So I'm going to start with the wrong choice. The wrong choice is to add your essay under comments. And in case you ever forget which one not to do this with, notice this is the first time you've seen a text box without all of those editing tools. That is your sign that all of your formatting will not be maintained. So just to show you what this looks like, I'm going to be uploading this document as my assignment, and I'm going to grab some of it and paste it here. And you can see now I've lost some of my formatting. The bulleted list is already gone. But what you'll see when I submit this and go into my submission, it's actually going to take away the line breaks too. And so if you submit your work here, your professor's not going to read it because it's not really going to be readable. What this space is for is really just comments. If there's something you're nervous about, if you have a question that you really want feedback from with your professor, you're going to want to put that in the comments here. So if this was an essay and I wasn't sure about my conclusion, I could write that as comments. Now, you do have 2 more. There's create submission, and you can see I've got my editor back. And there's also the opportunity to upload files. The preference is to upload a file. And in particular, you want to upload one of the files marked down here. It says it's for safe assign. It's actually for Blackboard. So even if this is not a safe assignment, you're going to want to avoid using a pages file or a numbers file if you're on a Mac. You're going to want to say save as, and save as the Microsoft equivalent. So for example, a Word file, a PowerPoint, an Excel file, things of that nature, or a PDF. The reason for this is because when you upload one of those file types, you are giving your professor access to a whole bunch of different commenting tools that they will not have if instead you type it in the text entry. So I'm going to do both here. I'm going to choose to keep my formatting so you can see it looks great, right? You can see I've uploaded my file and I have some comments, and I'm going to say submit. This is the page you'll get, and this is going to look very much like what your professor sees, and I'll show you that in just a moment. So it defaults to showing you the submission text, but you can see I can click on this link here, and it will convert my document, however Blackboard manages to do it. Eventually, I've got my Word document, just like it appeared on my machine. I also, you can see, have my comments, and all of those line breaks are gone. So imagine if you pasted a 4-page paper here, right? It would not be something that your professor could really evaluate well. Because this is an assignment I can submit more than one attempt to, I have a start new option here. So if you see this, or if you request from your professor, you say, I've made a mistake with what I uploaded, can you enable me to upload another file? You'll go back to the assignment and you'll see start new. And if I click that, I'm right back here. And I can upload a new assignment and do all of that. Before I go into the faculty view, I just want to show you my grades. So you can see at this point, I've got those yellow exclamation marks because I've submitted 2 things. I submitted to this discussion board and I just submitted this assignment, and they're both waiting for the professor to provide feedback. I can see the rubric for each. So here I am in the rubric for the discussion board. So you can see that, right? And now I'm going to give you just a behind the scenes view of what this looks like for a professor. So I'm going to keep my preview user data. And then I'm going to briefly pause my share just so I'm not showing you a whole bunch of students' work. So please give me one moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to navigate to my assignment that I just submitted. All right. So you can see this is from the professor's view. And it looks very similar to what you saw, right? I'm starting with the submission text. I have the comments. You can see Safe Assign has already provided me with matches. So it's showing me what that looks like. And I can click into this. And I can say View Originality Report. This is what the report looks like for your professor. And so you can see all of these things are highlighted. I can click on one and say, oh, look, it's a 100% match to something that was previously submitted. And I can decide as the faculty member if this is actually plagiarism or if this is a quotation. But here you can see I don't have any editing tools that are popping up or any commenting tools that are popping up. And so if you use text entry, because this is the text entry example, as your faculty member, I have options to look at the rubric. And so you can see this is that same rubric that you were looking at earlier. And it's creating a grade for me. I can create feedback associated with the rubric. I can also create sort of overall feedback. But if I wanted to give you the feedback you would receive in a face-to-face course where you have comments in the margins of your paper, I can't do that here. In order to have that option, I need you to have submitted a file. And if you do that, all of a sudden I have tools that I did not have before, and I can type on your work. So that we can give you the most feedback, please do save your work and upload it as a file. So now that I've done all of this, I'm going to save this feedback as the professor, and then I will go back to being my student self and just show you what this looks like in my grades. So you can see all of a sudden I have a grade. If I wanted to know how I got this grade, if I click View Rubric, I can now see that the professor scored me in these ways. If there's feedback on a particular dimension of the rubric, it would appear here. You can see the feedback I added to the rubric. So this is one place to look to for feedback. The other place to look to for feedback is to look to see if you've got this speech bubble. Because if you click that, you can see my overall feedback as well as the overall rubric feedback. But remember, I made comments in the margins. So to see those, see all the rest of the feedback, you actually need to click the name of the assignment and click the link to your upload. And that's where you'll see this here. So I just want to make sure that you know how to find all of that feedback, because sometimes you'll have work that's quote unquote scaffolded, which means the work you do, let's say in week 2 builds to the work you do in week 4. And it's important you have all of your feedback when that happens. All right, so with that done, just want to give you some tips for the semester. Then I'll hit any questions in the QA. And if we have a few minutes left, I'll show you what we have in a course site. General tips include, make sure that you note each class's weekly due dates. And like I said before, try to log in 2 to 3 times a week, particularly during fall to spring, but daily in the summer and also in the winter. If you're someone who's interested in using the mobile app, the Blackboard app, you're going to want to, during week 1, have it open in the app on your phone or your mobile device, and also have the site open on your computer so that you can see how things look different. Because sometimes things are easier to see on the desktop version, and some of those things are very important. Make sure also that you check announcements and email frequently, and ask questions early, but also make sure you give all relevant information. You should expect around 24 hours of a response window. And so if you email someone or a professor on Friday and they get back to you on Saturday and you realize that you didn't give them all of the information, you're now into Sunday. And if it's a Sunday due date, that's a problem. So think really hard and really carefully about all of the information that your professor or support staff office would need to help you. For support offices, that includes your EMPL, but for your professors, that can really vary depending on why you're emailing them. And again, just plan on waiting a possible 24 hours for a response. We do try to do better than that during orientation, but I don't want to set an unrealistic expectation for you. So I have a couple of questions that are popping up before I go into this CUNY SPS course. One question is it okay if I'm not registered for classes yet? I would say yes. However, you're going to want to register very soon, particularly if you think you are someone who would benefit from orientation. In order to have access to the more in-depth orientation, you are really going to want to register today if possible, possibly tomorrow. After that, you would be put into the website that you've seen me navigating. And so this is really a learn how to use the Blackboard organization type space. And that we will be loading people into throughout late registration. Key for you is to know that it can take 1 to 2 days between when you register for classes and when you gain access to those classes. So if you register for class on the first day of the semester, you're not going to have access the first day. It can take 1 to 2 days. And so that can be especially important during the accelerated semesters, but on your first semester, you definitely want access the first day. If you are someone in this blue site, there were a couple of people who were mentioning that earlier, and I just fixed it an hour or so ago. So please check it again. And if you still don't see it, send us an email or respond in the forum. I will be able to provide you with a link for the Blackboard app, because that is a question I see. Believe it might be in the orange menued orientation within resources, but either way, we will provide that to you separately. If you have a question about Spark, I'm going to ask you to email the Spark team. You're going to see an announcement about that in a couple of days. So just follow those instructions there, because really my answer to if you need to complete Spark depends on your specific situation, and I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. The name of the Blackboard app is really just Blackboard Mobile or the Blackboard app. So you can also do a search in your phone's app store, be it Android or iPhone. There is a Blackboard app for both. You will not be able to see your orientation there, however. I see a note about the app. If you send us an email about the app you're looking at that's no longer working, we'll make sure you're looking at the right one. There is going to be a recording, and we will email it to you as soon as it's available, and we'll also put it in the orientation site. And the answer to where you can find orientation depends on when you registered. So, if you have registered more than a couple of days ago, you should be able to access it being orientation within your Blackboard homepage. So I'm going to leave my preview user mode, go to my Blackboard homepage. So if you remember in the beginning, I went to cuny.edu, hovered over login, and clicked Blackboard. That will ask you to log in. Once you log in, you'll be here on the Blackboard homepage. If you are already registered for courses, you registered, let's say, over the weekend, you'll probably gain access to Blackboard tomorrow, possibly Wednesday. And you will see, or excuse me, you'll gain access to orientation tomorrow, possibly Wednesday. It will be listed under My Courses. If you register for courses after tomorrow, possibly including tomorrow, you will probably be in the orientation site you've just seen me navigating. It will be under My Organizations. You will receive an email from your facilitator when you have access. So if you haven't yet received an email, that probably means that you shouldn't have access yet, likely because of when you registered for courses. But you can email us, I'm going to skip this, at the address on your screen. This email address goes to me, as well as a couple of members of our team, and we will look at your particular situation and let you know. If a link doesn't work in Blackboard, do notify the professor, and in your orientation, that means notifying your facilitator. You do not need to do anything special to register for orientation, but you do need to meet with your advisor in order to register for classes. Once you've registered for classes, we automatically put you in orientation. Now, I see a couple of questions about orientation. So I'm just going to tell you rather than show you. To notice the orientation start questionnaire, you're going to go into the orientation site. You're going to go into weekly materials, week 1. The orientation start questionnaire is the first blue link in week 1. The Blackboard Basics quiz is also in weekly materials, week 1. In that case, you're going to look for Blackboard Basics, and it is the last item on the table of contents within the Blackboard Basics folder. Now, I know I only have 3 minutes, but I'm going to use them because I'm going to show you a site since we are all out of questions that I can see. So I am going to go into, I'll show you the great deal of courses I'm in. I'm going to go into Writing at Work. So this is a sample course site, and this is what a course will look like. You can see on the side, a lot of these look very similar. Now I am seeing a couple of extra things like resources and instructor only. So let me go in as student. So you can see this announcements page, very much like what you're seeing in orientation. And likewise, some of these should also seem familiar. So you've got contact/instructor info, which is where you'd find out information about your professor. There's course information. And this is where there is a video tour, which if I sign in, I can view information about your textbook, the syllabus. So we previously had a question about when you'll gain access to your syllabi. They are in your course site. You see, this looks very much like the syllabi for your orientation. So it's organized the same way, and it's organized pretty similar to what you'd probably see in your face-to-face courses at a previous CUNY. So there's information about what would happen during which week. In some cases, you can also access rubrics here. If there's anything special about the course, for example, here, this course is part of a professional connections initiative. You can see access, or you can access information about that as well. If I go into weekly materials, I can see that this course is organized into units, and then for each unit, there's a week. And just like in orientation, there's information about what your outcomes are for that week, as well as information about the week with tasks to complete, things to read and watch. And here you can start to see what I had mentioned. So you can see here, there are no blue links, but there is that underline, right? That underline means I can click in, and it's either an assignment or a file or a folder. Here are some blue links here. So just be aware, this is what it will look like when it's not blue. And we do try to make some links blue when we have a course for new students. The forums look very similar. My grades also look similar, and you can see here, just like I was saying before, those rubrics are here. So this is an actual rubric in a course. And it's the same thing for larger assignments. So the rubrics become more complicated, but you can come in here and you can see exactly what your professor is going to be looking for and how they are going to evaluate your work. So that is it for our time. I do see that some more questions came in. If I may, I see we're a minute over time, so very quickly. There's a question about Blackboard. You will be using Blackboard for all of the spring. So CUNY overall, this question is asking about Brightspace. If you're aware, CUNY is moving to Brightspace. It is not doing so in the middle of a semester. So since you are starting this semester in Blackboard, you will be using Blackboard for the whole semester. And before we transition to Brightspace, we will have a similar training available to you, as well as similar resources so you can learn the new system when you need to. The location for resources to assist you with how to use Blackboard depends on your site. If you're in the orientation with the orange, Blackboard Basics has those resources, but that's also what your facilitator is for. If you're in the orientation with the blue, the entire orientation is resources. Both of those orientations will be available to you, whichever one you're in will be available to you throughout the semester. And you can always email us as well for help. And then there's someone saying they don't see the submission assignment on Blackboard. If you are not in the orientation I was just in, you don't have one to worry about. So you're all set. All right. So that is it for this webinar. Thank you so, so much for your time and your attention and all of your questions. I hope this whirlwind was helpful. But again, if you have any questions, please do reach out to us on the forum or by email. We are glad to help you. So I look forward to seeing you in the orientation site. And I hope you're well and that the lead into the semester is going smoothly for you. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.